Police fired tear gas and warning shots in the capital Tunis to disperse crowds on the third consecutive day of violence. The violence comes as Mohamed Ghannouchi announces he will step down as prime minister. He had planned to guide the country to elections in July after President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali was deposed last month. Former Foreign Minister Al-Beji Qaid Al-Sebsi has been appointed in his place. A human rights group says 2 Iranian opposition leaders have been abducted by security forces and are in grave danger. Mehdi Karoubi and Mir Hossein Mousavi have been under unofficial house arrest since the start of the month. The government blames them for inciting pro-reform protests. The 83rd Annual Academy Awards ceremony is set to begin in a couple of hours from now. You're looking at live pictures. The King's Speech star Colin Firth arrived on the red carpet just moments ago.
Growing concerns over food shortages and lack of medical supplies in Libya as violence escalates. Just what is the scale of the humanitarian crisis in Libya and what's being done about it? And could this be part of Muammar Gaddafi's desperate efforts to cling to power? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled Libya amid a violent uprising against Muammar Gaddafi's 41-year rule. And as protests continues, fears are now growing of a possible humanitarian crisis. As the death toll creeps over 1,000, medical supplies are running dangerously short, as well as fuel and food. Humanitarian organizations and countries like Turkey and the UAE have put together aid plans for Libya. Well, the oil-rich North African country is also heavily reliant on imports, bringing in 75% of its food from abroad. Let's take a quick look now at Libya's main import partners. Italy is its most valued partner, supplying almost 20% of its imports. China accounts for nearly 11%, and Turkey and Germany almost 10% respectively. France and Tunisia supply nearly 6%, and South Korea 4.02% of Libya imports. But with the main ports closed, the situation in Libya is becoming increasingly desperate. And joining us now to talk more about this are our 3 guests. From Cairo, Osama Mustafa, a coordinator for the Libyan aid agency Tawasil. From London, Libyan human rights activist and member of the British Libyan Solidarity Campaign, Abu Bakr Deghaze. And joining us on the line from Benghazi, aid worker Abdul. Abdul has been coordinating the aid which is coming in from the Egyptian border into the eastern part of the country. And we're not giving out his full name for his own safety. Gentlemen, I want to welcome all 3 of you to the programme. Abdul, if I could start with you. Tell us what the situation is like on the ground where you are. What's the most urgent need for people there? Is it food supplies? Is it medical supplies? What do people need most?
Well, over here in Benghazi, actually, at the moment, the most concerning thing they have here is security. They want to feel safe, and luckily, the UN's announcements today have given the people some hope. Medical aid is in short supply, but there is a lot of aid on its way. I'm in direct contact with several organizations, and they are sending many things towards us.
So what are some of the logistical challenges that you face inside Libya at the moment, given, as you mentioned, the very volatile security situation?
Well, everything seems to be under control. I mean, the youth here are doing an amazing job of helping out, providing security for the public, controlling traffic, taking supplies back and forth from places to people who need it, especially the elderly or the disabled. You know, a lot of care has been taken into consideration of these things.
And you talk about... Sorry, go ahead, carry on.
Yeah, in regards to medical supplies, the new government has appointed people in charge of things. I'm in contact with these people, and we're going to start distributing medical supplies in an orderly fashion, hopefully get the right things to the right people, and take things from there, really.
And presumably, are you working in conjunction with the government that is taking shape there? What kind of leadership is there in Benghazi at the moment, and what are they doing to meet the needs of people there?
Well, at the moment, it's still slightly chaotic. Things are taking shape, but slowly. The people who are in charge, they need help in a way. They don't have much experience in these things, and I guess this is the right time for all those Libyans who have been living abroad for so many years to come home and actually give a hand, because this is where and when they're needed.
And what are the main supply lines then? I mean, you're in the port of Benghazi, where supplies are coming in by sea. What about through the border from Egypt? Is that I mean, what is the challenge? What are the challenges involved in getting the aid to people from there?
The main challenge really is at the border itself. The Egyptian government, they are allowing things through, but they're being very strict on paperwork and just everything, you know, the procedure of things before things get through. So things are taking a long time. Things are being held at the border for up to 1 or 2 days. And of course, this is giving us delays. But no, things are, like when I came through the border, I was picked up by a group of guys who took me from one city to another and made sure that I made it to Benghazi safely. And there's amazing coordination between the people over here, right across from Benghazi all the way to the border. And everyone is working together, everyone is helping each other, and they're all united in one amazing way, really.
Osama Mustafa, if I could turn to you now. I know you're coordinating supplies for people inside Libya from Cairo, where you are. You've heard it from somebody inside Libya. Does that square with the accounts that you're hearing? And have you been able to meet some of the many challenges that people face there?
Yes, we've been coordinating very heavily with people inside of Libya and especially Benghazi, and we've been directly told what's now the specialty medicines and the specialty requirements that are coming up, from kidney treatment to orthopedics. And we've been very lucky this whole week. We've been sending supplies, food and medicine, babies' food and such, through the border at the Egyptian border. I know personally I was at the border this whole week at Sadnum, coordinating across and helping various aid get through the border and to hand off with our trusted contacts at the border to make sure the supplies got to Benghazi.
Do you think much more could be done? I mean, some people have said it's been quite late, several days into the conflict.
Yes, I mean, we tried to mobilize as fast as that we could to bring as much aid as we could, but I mean, there's always more and more demand, and it was, you know, the communication has been a challenge inside of Libya to make sure we're getting exactly the right items that we need. And as he's put it, that the delays that it takes a day or 2 to 3 days sometimes to get across what they needed right then, the requirements change the next day based upon the health requirements and food requirements.
Abu Bakr Dighays, you've been hearing some of these accounts from 2 aid workers. As someone who's been hearing all these accounts from London, does that square with what you're hearing? And do you think the international community could be doing more?
Yes, of course they could be doing more. I mean, the accounts, yes, the same thing we've been hearing in London. But the picture in the east has not been revealed, which is much, much worse. I mean, Benghazi, sorry, the picture in the west, Benghazi in the east, they've been liberated from Gaddafi, and the border with Egypt, there's still things going. But in West Tripoli and the west of the country, it's even worse than that. You know, we hear of news, first account news, that Gaddafi has replaced the border customs and immigration with, you know, it's being controlled now by this Kataib, or what they call his son's military, and they're not allowing anything in. I mean, there are trucks which are stopping there from the Red Crescent, Tunisian Red Crescent, Red Cross, Islamic Relief, various other NGOs, but they're not allowed to go in. The only thing they're allowing in is blood. The hospitals in Tripoli, they've run out of medicine because what the world must remember and have in sight that this man is not only prepared to use weapons of mass destruction against his people to stay in power. He is willing to use anything, you know, even food, medication. His son said it openly and clearly.
That would include starving his people, you believe?
Yes, yes. I mean, now as we speak, in the west, the mountain in the west, which we call Jibal Nafusa, these areas, water has been cut off because they don't have wells. It's a very mountainous area. So the supply from the government water is being cut off, and they've been depending on the water they collected from rain. So the bread is being rationed in Tripoli now. The basic food, you know, there's a shortage of it. So he will use anything, and his son said to them, from tomorrow, if you don't accept my proposal, you'll have no hospitals, you'll have no schools for your children, there'll be no oil, no petrol for your cars. I mean, again, in the mountainous area, there's no petrol for cars, you know. So he's using everything. So the border is closed, the port of Tripoli also is closed. People are starting to feel the shortage in food. We had accounts from doctors from Tripoli hospitals that medicines, they've been barred, they're not being supplied by the government with medication. Injured people have been taken from there to places which they don't know. So the situation is much, much worse in the West, and that's where we need to work very hard to have a safe passage for food, medicine, basic things which people need to live.
All right, Abdul, if I could turn back to you. Obviously, information coming out of the West is very sketchy, information from the west of Libya, that is. But you heard the accounts from Abu Bakr there about some of the things the accounts that he's been hearing. Has it been a real challenge for some of the aid agencies that you've been working to get to the West? And presumably the situation there must be a lot worse for them.
I think one of the things that we really need the international community on is what the other guest had mentioned on, is the West is in desperate need of food and medication. And we need them to be making it a little bit easier to ship out of those countries to try to get into Libya, and put pressure on the various organizations to allow in this aid to come into Libya that is desperately needed. I mean, today we've been talking with people in Misrata that are telling us that the basic necessities have become significantly in shortage, that they're in need of everything from basic food and to any kind of medicine, because they're still under attack and they really do not have those things available to them.
Abu Bakr,
and we really do hope that...
Yeah, carry on.
And as I said, the international community, they've turned to us asking us to find pathways and ways to deliver the critical needed aid toward them into the Misrata ports or into the other various potential seaports that could be delivered aid into.
Abu Bakr, it's been said that sanctions could run the risk of perhaps strengthening Gaddafi's regime and those around him rather than weaken him. Is that something that you fear? Do you think there's any truth to that?
Well, it depends what sort of sanctions they're planning to put. I mean, you can put sanctions on Gaddafi himself and his family. For example, you can stop mercenaries coming and being flown into the country. You know, you can bar him from using his aircrafts against the people. There's so many measures. You know, for example, the step they took now, which is freezing all his assets, you know, personal assets or his money abroad, where he can't use to pay mercenaries or pay aircrafts to bring them over, things like that. You know, if they put measures aimed at him and his followers or his fighters or his relatives, you know, that will help the Libyans, obviously. You know, but if it's put just a blanket sanction on the whole country, of course, that will give him more strength, because he has the reserve. Everything is underneath him. So he will stay, no shortage for him and his army and his militia, and the people will be suffering, obviously, out of hunger and out of disease and stuff like that. So I think the international community is intelligent enough by now and experienced enough by now in so many conflicts in the world, where they can aim their sanctions on him and his government and his army and his militia, and let the people prosper and be strong.